The Republican Party officially picked Donald Trump as its presidential nominee. Has the GOP finally come together as a united party? From marriage to transgender bathrooms, the GOP platform has been applauded by Christians. We look at how the GOP is treating key issues. This year's convention didn't have many African-American delegates. What does Trump have to do to win minority votes in November? And one senator's ideas on race, faith, and prayer in politics. Those stories and more on this special edition from the Republican National Convention in Cleveland.
My message is that things have to change, and they have to change right now.
Good evening, and thank you for joining us for EWTN's Convention Special. I'm Lauren Ashburn. The 2016 Republican Convention has been unlike any other GOP convention in history. From Ted Cruz's refusal to endorse Donald Trump, to charges of plagiarism against Melania Trump, to an awkward air kiss between the nominees, it has been a fascinating week. Leaders hoped for a show of unity, but questions remain if the Republican Party can move forward as a united group. Matt Schlapp is the chairman of the American Conservative Union. Mercedes Schlapp is a Republican strategist. Thank you so much for joining us.
It's great to be here. Exciting night.
Almost finished. Did the GOP succeed in uniting the party?
You know, they're going to come out of this convention more united than anybody ever thought they would be. It's not going to be quite the same because Donald Trump is an outsider, and he's more independent than we've used to seeing as our Republican nominee.
Well, he's no politician.
He's no politician, but I think he's going to get more crossover votes from independents, from blue-collar Democrats, from people who feel left out of the economy than we've ever seen before, so I think we are.
What about you, Mercedes? It's been a dramatic week.
Well, dramatic week. It's been an emotional roller coaster, I have to say, for so many delegates, for so many Republicans. But I think the reality is setting in. Realize that time is running short. It's time right now to come together, support Donald Trump, because the other option is just destructive for our nation and for our religious liberties. So I have to say, this is Donald Trump's moment, and I think he will inspire, he will make the case as to why he is fit to be President of the United States.
All right, let's go through hits and misses. Hits.
Hits would be the speeches from the children. A father who raises kids like this, it is not accidental.
What about you? What are the misses, do you
Oh,
think?
well, definitely Ted Cruz. I felt that was a moment where there was almost a bit of sadness because I think that we were expecting just so much more from Ted Cruz. So many delegates that had supported him came out and were very upset with the fact that he decided not to support Donald Trump. And we were at the Texas delegation breakfast, and they were saying, we stood by you, Ted, and we want you to stand with us. So I think it was a very missed opportunity, very unfortunate.
Okay, there are 108 days until the election.
Wow.
What do you think he has to do to win the election?
Three simple things. Talk about how Washington is broken and how he's going to upset the order of things. Number two, talk about how he's going to add jobs to this economy and get it going. And number three, stand up, keep us safe, and destroy these terrorists who are in our communities and overseas.
And number four,
Okay,
ensure
excellent.
that he strengthens his campaign organization. He has talent on his team. It's a bit streamlined. This is about expanding his team, really building out its get out the vote efforts, and reaching the different communities. Also, closing the gap for women voters and for minorities is going to be key. He's going to need to message to those communities with the economic populist message, with the national security message. Those are two winning messages. I think if he goes in that direction, it could be a victory for Donald Trump in November.
Okay, thumbs up or thumbs down on this convention as a whole?
Oh, Lord. Oh, my goodness. I'm going to have to, it goes up and down. This convention has been a therapy session in a weird way for the party. This is a moment, the party has gone through so much. You've had 16, 17 candidates run for president. It takes time. The problem is we don't have enough time, and I think the party recognizes that, and I think the grassroots activists in particular recognize that we got to get moving fast.
One of my favorite married Catholic couples, Mercedes and Matt Schlapp. Thank you both so much for joining us.
Thanks, Lauren.
In addition to all the speeches, protests, controversies, and festivities, There is also official business happening at the convention. On Tuesday, the delegates approved the GOP platform outlining the Republican Party's stand on key issues. It serves as a guide for Republican lawmakers for the next 4 years, and this year, conservative Christians are singing its praises. Jason Calvi has the story.
Opposed, nay? Nay. The ayes have it. The platform is adopted.
These delegates from around the country debated, wrote, and they approved the party platform. Then the whole floor followed suit. For the first time, it calls for a ban on dismemberment abortions.
In the platform, it says what it is, which is a procedure that tears apart an unborn child limb from limb.
Mary Kay Culp with Kansans for Life wrote a part of the platform in response to the undercover Planned Parenthood videos. It deals with the consent forms used for mothers who donate their aborted child's bodies for research.
I want them to also make sure that the so-called consent forms that Planned Parenthood uses to sell abortions to women about if you donate your, quote, pregnancy tissue, they don't say aborted baby, pregnancy tissue, that it could cure AIDS and Parkinson's and Alzheimer's and cancer and diabetes, which none of that is true.
The Trump campaign took a hands-off approach to social issues, but did fight on immigration and building a wall along the U.S.-Mexico border. Political scientist Elaine Kamarck says the platform is a non-binding roadmap for the parties and for voters clearly distinguishes Republicans from Democrats.
It's a way for the party to discuss what it stands for at any given point in time. And the two platforms are very, very different this time around. I mean, extraordinarily different.
Thanks, Jason. Former GOP presidential candidate Ben Carson made some headlines this week when he called the transgender issue the height of absurdity. I talked to Dr. Carson earlier and asked him what he meant by that remark.
People wake up one day and they say, they're a man, and they say, you know, today I feel like a woman. And there was a story about a man, it was in Ross, he was in the Ross store in the women's dressing room. And a woman came in and she was disturbed, and she went and told the manager, and the manager came to expel him, but then came back out and said, well, he says, even though, you know, he had a 5 o'clock shadow and he was dressed, that he feels like a woman today. So, I mean, we have to let him.
And that's why it doesn't make sense to you? Is it because of your faith, because of your religion?
No, it's because of my brain. It's because
I asked for that.
You know, for thousands of years, we've known what a man is, and we've known what a woman is. All of a sudden, we don't know anymore. Can you imagine the confusion that this causes our children? Genetics tell us who's a man and a woman.
And who's a woman. Going forward, we're about to wrap up the convention. We'll be wrapping up the convention. What do you think your role will be? You have been a great advocate for education in this country and the need to improve it. Do you hope to have some sort of role in the administration?
I would prefer to work from outside the administration, like I have been doing for years. Because, you know, there's so many issues that I've gotten involved in. Health care, education, you know, terrorism. I mean, just about everything now. I don't really want to pigeonhole myself.
Donald Trump faces an uphill battle with both African-American and Hispanic voters. At this week's convention, there were reportedly only 18 African-American delegates out of 2,472, a significant drop from previous conventions. Earlier this week, I interviewed Alfonso Aguilar, president of Latino Partnership for Conservative Principles, and Star Parker, founder and president of the Center for Urban Renewal and Education. I asked Star why she thinks there was such a low number of black delegates at this convention.
Well, in 2004, there was, and up until that time, a lot of work was done within the Republican Party to reach out to the black community, to go inside and say that our values are your values. They knew that this is the most church community in the country, but yet they were voting for big government, which is inconsistent with the very scriptures that they were hearing on Sunday morning. That is not what is happening right now in this new secular environment, this secular overtake of the Republican Party. It is very hard then to make the case into that wing of the black community that would want to hear the message of freedom.
Secular overtake, I think that might be in conflict with what we're hearing, but we can get back to that in just a second. The numbers are equally as disturbing for Hispanics, especially this year with all of the talk about the wall and immigration. Right. Hispanic Catholics largely favor Hillary Clinton 3-1. That's 77% to 16%. Why? Is it immigration? Is it the wall?
Well, partly it's immigration, certainly, but frankly, we haven't done our job. Ronald Reagan used to say Hispanics are conservative, but they just don't know it. And he didn't mean it in a condescending way. He meant that if we engage them, they're going to respond favorably. They are conservative. They're pro-life. They believe in the family. But we have to engage them, and we're not showing up in the community. If we tell them what Hillary Clinton stands for, that she wants to do away with restrictions to federal funding to Planned Parenthood, an organization that's targeting Latinos, 22% of all abortions today are performed on Latina women. Latina women are victims of democratic policies. They will respond, but we have to engage them. And hopefully we'll have time to make that case.
You know, Hillary Clinton has a 19% lead among Catholics who attend Mass weekly, Star. I know you're converting. And yet you're saying that the party is very secular while we're seeing one of the most conservative platforms we've ever seen. Why do you think it is?
Well, the platform is conservative because the people that are on the platform committees are conservatives, and they had a battle. When you think about the leadership of the Republican Party right now with the Trump nomination, it is secular. So as Alfonso is saying, we are going to have to make a special case on issues. We are going to have to make sure that these minority communities understand what is at stake when they vote for liberals, not just the Supreme Court, but to entrench abortion. The Catholics need to understand this. When you say you are pro-life and you look at numbers, for instance, in 2005, black abortion numbers were 684,000 in that 1 year alone. Once you start revealing what Hillary Clinton and her party represent, I think that you'll start seeing some people vote their values.
Make America Safe Again was the opening night theme of this GOP convention, and with Americans on edge over racial tensions and possible terrorist attacks, Trump's rhetoric resonates with many of the voters. Oklahoma Senator James Lankford sits on the Senate Select Committee on Intelligence and the Homeland Security Committee. I asked him what practical policy ideas Donald Trump is proposing to keep the U.S. secure.
There wasn't a lot of policy conversation. It was a big picture look to say this is important. And I think it's one of those areas where it was an attempt to be able to pull Americans in to say, do we feel this is important? And it was key that it was the very first night. I think it's the top issue. When I talk to most people across my state, they say whether you're a mom, whether you're dad, whether you're a child, they're concerned about terrorism. They're concerned about the instability in the country. They're concerned about police violence, all these things. They're concerned about African-American violence from the police. I mean, this becomes, depending on the community you talk to, there's an insecurity about, are we physically safe again?
Let's talk about the African-American community. You, on the Senate floor, had a very powerful speech last week where you said, have you, addressing everyone, ever invited another family of another race to your home for dinner? Why did you do that? And what are you doing to help race relations within your own party?
Well, for me, I've got a chance to be able to meet people in my own community and to be able to talk as an ongoing conversation, friendships and relationships that I have multiracial. But I think the key thing is, as odd as this sounds, most of the issues we face as a nation are family issues. Most of the solutions that we face are also family solutions. What I've said is, we're not until we get all things on the table, we need to get all of our feet under the same table
to
be able to actually
night.
Have dinner.
Beginning with prayer.
Beginning with prayer would be terrific. But it is very different. I'm surprised at the number of people that I've talked to. They've said they've never had another family of another race in their home for dinner. Well, if you can't model that type of relationship,
really
it is. But if you can't model that type of relationship, your kids don't pick it up and you don't take it to the next generation. If you're going to have hard conversations, it's not going to be at a rally. It's not going to be because leaders meet with the press around it. It's because family to family have those hard conversations together.
But then how do you justify the fact that there are only 18 African-American delegates? That's down from 164 years and years ago.
Yeah, that's an enormous drop, both of what's happening in this convention. I don't think that's a drop across the country. I don't know the dynamics on that that and all the reasons for it, but it's something that we should be able to present a conservative view to say conservative principles work in every community, in every race, in every economic development of every family. And so this is a set of ideas that work. If they don't work, we should drop those ideas, but it should bring security to families, to neighborhoods, to education, economic development. Those are things everybody cares about.
You're also the co-chair of the Congressional Prayer Caucus. The role in politics of religion, 17-point drop from 2008. It's unbelievable. The percentage of registered voters who believe it's important for the president to have strong religious views is down 10 points from 2008. What's happening to our society?
People are afraid of faith. And it's the very odd dynamic that's happening in this generation. That people would say, you could have faith, just keep it over there. I don't want to see it. Don't bring it out of your home. If you have faith, that's a nice thing to do. I just don't want you to bring it out in the public venue. That's not who we are as Americans. We don't have the freedom of worship. We have the free exercise of religion. That means you can have a faith and live your faith. And we need to be a society that's very permissive. It's amazing to me that there are a lot of people who say we want to be an open, diverse society except for religion.
Right.
And I think that's a horrible exception because we need to allow people to not only have their faith, but live their faith.
Well, in prayer and politics, how important is that to you?
Oh, well, you go back to just Article 6 of the Constitution, the very founding, not during the amendments, the actual writing of the Constitution itself. Article 6 of the Constitution says there's no religious test for any officer of the United States. So from the very beginning, the founders wanted to make sure that any elected individual could not only have faith, but could live that faith. So they're not pigeonholed off to say, well, don't be a person of faith if you're going to be elected, or take that off. I think it's important that people of faith that are elected can still continue to live their faith, but there's also not a requirement to be elected that you have a certain faith.
But then how do you square that with Donald Trump and his call for basically a test, a religious test for Muslims coming into the country?
Right. Well, I'm grateful, I have to tell you, because I made several public statements on that as well, but I'm grateful that he has pulled back from this statement of Muslims are not allowed in our country, because that's not who we are. Number one, you can't even enforce that. You can't stop at the border and say, tell me what faith you are before.
And the terrorist is going to say, I'm Christian, right?
Yeah, terrorists
if
would never.
They are Muslim,
yeah,
right?
so that it's not going to work on that. What he's pulled back, and he said there are certain states and certain nation states, I should say, where there are more Islamic terrorism coming than other areas. There are 19 states, or there are nations right now that they have what they call a province of ISIS that are in there. It's entirely reasonable to have a higher level of security and of examination for individuals coming from those countries. We just saw in Europe in the past week a refugee that went and attacked in Europe that was one of these Muslim extremists that came as a refugee to do an attack. It's not an unreasonable thing to do, but you can't just say based on your faith you're going to put you out. It has to be based on a true national security issue.
Oklahoma Senator James Langford, thank you so much for joining us.
You're glad to be able to do it.
Coming up, prayer and politics. Did the GOP convention convey a message of faith?
I believe we have come to another rendezvous with destiny, and I have faith. Faith in the boundless capacity of the American people, and faith that God can still heal our land.
Welcome back to EWTN's Convention Special. I'm Lauren Ashburn. That was Governor Mike Pence, Donald Trump's running mate. Faith has been invoked often this week, but throughout the primary season, Donald Trump did not win over the majority of Catholic voters. A recent Pew poll found that Catholics attending Mass at least once a week are supporting Hillary Clinton by a wide margin. I talked to Dr. Matthew Bunson, a Catholic theologian, historian, and senior contributor to EWTN, about the issue of faith in politics. I began by asking him if this convention helped Trump get in touch with Catholic voters.
Coming into the convention, Trump had a serious problem with Catholic voters. He's trailing Hillary Clinton, according to the latest Pew poll, by 56 to 39%. His task in this convention, trying to reach out to Catholics, was to touch a specific group, those who are active, faithful, Mass-attending Catholics. What we're going to have to look for now, statistically, is each campaign is going to be polling, did he get something of a Catholic bump with them?
You know, Catholics don't call elections anymore, but they are important because they have, since Roosevelt, basically had picked all of the popular vote, right? So
Yeah.
they're picking the candidate at least. Now tell me, there are two different types of Catholics: Hispanic Catholics, white Catholics from working class families.
Correct.
What is the difference, and has Donald Trump been able to reach any of them?
Yeah, Trump has a huge problem on his hands with Latino Catholics. So they're supporting Hillary Clinton by a majority of about 77%. Trump is leading among white Catholics about 50 to 46%, again, according to the Pew poll. No Republican candidate for president has carried the Catholic vote since 1984 and Ronald Reagan. So we're seeing a sea change within the Catholic vote itself, but the idea that there's some sort of a solid Catholic bloc simply does not exist.
Does this socially conservative platform that we saw voted on help Donald Trump with Catholics?
I think it does. It's unusual in that a platform is usually an expression of the candidate's ideals and principles. In this case, Donald Trump allowed the platform to be his guide. He allowed the social conservatives, in many ways social conservative Catholics, to have a say in drafting this. So what we find in the platform is fairly consistent language with many aspects of Catholic social thought. Now he has to carry that forward to appeal to enough Catholic voters to make a real difference.
Okay. Thank you so much, Dr. Matthew Bunson, historian, theologian, and senior contributor to EWTN.
Good to be with you.
Up next, is Trump succeeding in speaking to the faithful? The head of the Faith and Freedom Coalition shares his thoughts on the Republican nominee.
Welcome back to EWTN's Convention Special. I'm Lauren Ashburn. Ralph Reed is the founder and chairman of the Faith and Freedom Coalition. He was a senior advisor to the Bush-Cheney campaigns in 2000 and 2004. He was also the first director of the Christian Coalition. Ralph, does Trump speak to the faithful?
Well, he clearly does. I mean, who would have thought 53 weeks ago when he jumped into the fray that Donald Trump would win the evangelical vote?
I don't think anybody thought that.
In a field that included Rick Santorum, who is Roman Catholic but has great appeal among evangelicals.
Mike
Huckabee, who's a former preacher. Scott Walker, who's the son of a preacher. Ted Cruz, who's the son of an evangelical preacher. And I could name many others, including Ben Carson. Really too many to name. And yet, in the primaries, Donald Trump won the evangelical vote. And he did so because he's pro-life, he's pro-traditional marriage, he's pro-family, he strongly supports religious liberty. He defends the Hobby Lobby decision. He defends the Little Sisters of the Poor. And he has called for the repeal of the Johnson Amendment, which is the Internal Revenue Code provision that says that any church, any ministry, or any faith-based charity that speaks out at all politically will have its tax-exempt status yanked. That provision has been used to persecute, harass, bully, and intimidate the conservative faith community for over 60 years, and for the first time in the history of the Republican Party,
it's going to be repealed.
The Republican nominee says, I'm going to repeal it. So does he speak to the faithful? You better believe he does.
Sounds like he does. There have been a lot of questions about his pro-life stance. Early on, he is pro-life. He had a conversion. He was not pro-life. But I think that even coming out of this, there is still question in people's mind as to whether or not he will work hard for pro-life values.
I can't speak for Donald Trump, but I can speak as someone who is his friend and who has known him for 7 years and has talked to him about this issue. His conversion to a pro-life position did not happen yesterday or last year. It did not begin with this campaign. I don't know exactly when it occurred, but it was a long time ago. He hasn't said anything pro-choice on the record, to my knowledge, in 17 years. And he told me, when he and I talked about this some years ago, that he became pro-life because he had a very good friend who had basically a crisis or unwanted pregnancy, a pregnancy basically they didn't plan. Sure. This person came to him and said they were considering an abortion. I believe there was some pressure from their husband to end the pregnancy. They ultimately decided to keep the child. The child does not know. The child was born. The child doesn't know that their mother was considering ending their life. They certainly don't know that Donald Trump knows. And he told me, I have watched this person grow up to be an unbelievable human being, talented, gifted, vivacious. And he said, and as that happened, I realized, wait a minute, think how many incredible people
that person has touched.
Children are a blessing and a gift from God. Donald Trump found that out.
Ralph Reed, thank you so much for joining us, founder
Thank you,
and
Lauren.
chairman
Good to be with you.
the Faith and Freedom Coalition. Thank you for joining us for this special edition, and tune in next week for our coverage of the Democratic National Convention in Philadelphia. Until next week, like us on Facebook and follow us on Twitter at EWTN and at Lauren Ashburn. For the EWTN Politics team, I'm Lauren Ashburn. Good night, and God bless.